Hello. If everyone wants to make their way to the seats, we're about to begin. So thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Devin Middlebrook, South Lake Tahoe City Council member. Before we start, I want to give a big thank you to the Lake Tahoe Unified School District for allowing us to use the middle school multi-purpose room and accommodating us tonight. And a big thank you to all of you who are here tonight to learn about wildfire preparedness, emergency response. We're also streaming this video live on Facebook, and a recording will be available for everyone to watch afterwards. This is obviously an extremely critical and extremely important topic to not only our community, but the city and all of the partners you will hear from tonight. I still have very vivid memories of being evacuated during the 2007 Angora fire and the chaos and confusion that stemmed from that process. And obviously, we want to make sure that we're prepared for the unfortunate and hopefully never happens event of something like that happening again in our community. And that's what we're here to do today. You're going to hear from eight panelists. They're each going to update you on a variety of topics with wildfire preparedness, emergency response, evacuation routes, and what you can do as a homeowner and a resident of our community to be ready. And I think if you can walk away with anything tonight, it's going to be that. The role that you as a community member play in making our entire town wildfire ready. Doing your defensible space, having an evacuation plan, having a go kit, and most importantly, telling your neighbor and getting people that you know that aren't in this room tonight to watch the video, to be ready, to be prepared. We will have our panel. We'll open it up to a Q&A session afterwards. And then all of our panelists after the event will stick around by the booths for some information for more questions and answers. Make sure you get more information there. And without further ado, we're going to begin by handing it off to Chris Anthony with CAL FIRE.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Anthony with CAL FIRE. I have the East Division operations here in South Lake Tahoe and Alpine County.
Good evening. My name is Steve Burns. I'm the Forest Fire Management Officer for the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit.
Good evening. My name is Jim Drennan, Battalion Chief with South Lake Tahoe Fire. I'm the current interim fire chief, and we're in a process right now of recruiting a new one.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening. I'm Tim Alameda, current Chief of Lake Valley Fire Protection District out in Myers and Tahoe Paradise and in the Golden Bear and Montgomery Estates areas. And Camp Richardson.
Good evening. Lieutenant Jim Byers, El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. I run our Office of Emergency Services for the entire county.
Dave Stevenson, Lieutenant with the South Lake Tahoe Police Department.
Terry Lowther, Lieutenant and Commander of the South Lake Tahoe CHP office in Myers.
Good evening, Justin Zanino, Assistant Principal at the high school and Crisis Response for the district.
Hi, I'm Chris Proctor. I'm an Administrative Director for Barton Health.
Hi, I'm Carly Murphy, the Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator at the Tahoe Resource Conservation District.
So again, thank you so much for being here. Each one of us will be giving a short presentation, as Devin had mentioned. So I think it's important to start with a historical perspective when we talk about some of the issues that are concerning to all of us. And so CAL FIRE keeps records of fires dating back all the way to 1932 and in the state of California. And just in the last 2 years, we've actually had 4 out of 20 of the largest fires in the state's history. But what's interesting about that is it's not an anomaly. In fact, we have had 15 out of 20 of our largest fires in the state just since the year 2000. And I can assure you that today we have a more robust fire protection system in place than we did back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and even the 80s. So clearly something is changing. Unfortunately, we've had 7 of the most destructive fires in the state's history in just the last 19 months. And that's really a measurement of the number of structures that are destroyed. In addition to that, we've had 5 of the most deadly since 2017. So we look at these statistics, we see what's happening, and it really speaks to the need for these types of community events and meetings so that you can understand what we're doing to be prepared, but then what also you can do to be prepared as well. So in 2017, we had the Tubbs fire. So we had a number of fires that occurred down in Napa and Sonoma counties. Certainly got a lot of people's attention. The Tubbs was the most destructive fire at the time in the state's history. When I left Napa County, I thought, we're done for the year. How could it get any worse than that? And then in December, just weeks after we closed out those fires down in Napa and Sonoma, we had the Thomas Fire, which started in Ventura County, burned up into Santa Barbara County, and quickly became the state's largest fire in the state's history. And it really seemed like an unremarkable year. It seemed like it was something that we would never see again, to have both the most destructive and the largest fire in the state's history, especially to that scale. Unfortunately, in 2018, we had the Carr Fire, the Mendocino Complex, the Camp Fire, and the Woolsey Fire, among others. There was many other large fires that occurred just this past year. The Mendocino Fire Complex quickly became the state's largest fire, eclipsing the Thomas Fire by well over 100,000 acres. And then, as you're all aware, the Camp Fire, which occurred up in the city of Paradise, completely eclipsed anything that we saw with the Tubbs Fire and the destruction in Santa Rosa. So what we thought was unrepeatable repeated itself in 2018, and not only repeated itself, but was far worse than what we saw the year previously. So here's the Camp Fire. Certainly, it did get a lot of people's attention. We know that there's going to be questions about that fire tonight. One of the things that I would stress is it's not exactly a one-to-one correlation in terms of what we saw in the Camp Fire and here in South Lake Tahoe, but there are things and lessons that we can learn from that fire that we'll discuss later on. So these are some of the fire conditions that we saw on the Camp Fire. What I'm seeing on these fires and what we're all seeing is they're just far more intense, and their resistance to control is much higher. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a prescribed burn over on the west shore at Sugar Pine Point State Park. This is good fire. One of the things that we'll be stressing tonight is not all fire is bad fire. In fact, what we're trying to do is get our landscape and our forests back into a place where we can actually reintroduce good fire, because it is a management tool, and these forests that we live in are adapted to it. So why are things getting so much worse? So on average, our fire seasons are up to 78 days longer than they were just 4 decades ago. So there's a much longer time when we have fuels that are available to burn. In addition to that, we have forests that are overcrowded, they're overdense. We don't have the same landscape that we had prior to fire suppression. And that was one of the things. We've excluded fire out of the environment. And as a result of that, we just simply have overstocked and overdense forests. But there's a lot of really good work that has occurred here in the Lake Tahoe Basin that will also be talked about as well. Legacy building codes and constructions. I'd like to hit on that really quickly. One of the things that we're seeing is that those subdivisions or homes that are built under the new fire codes and building codes tend to withstand these fires much better than homes that were built prior to the implementation of that code. And so building construction is a very important thing, as well as defensible space. And so how are we responding as a group? One of the things that we have done is we've done a pre-attack plan, and I'm going to make those available to the public tonight. They're not an evacuation plan. They're pre-attack plans. They're plans that we use as first responders to look at the landscape. And so this is what one looks like. I have a whole bunch of paper copies over here. We have maps over here. And so far, we've pre-attack planned South Lake Tahoe, basically from Luther Pass to the Y. all of the West Shore and the North Shore. And then we just got good news about a week ago that we got a $27,000 grant to continue that pre-attack planning process for the rest of South Lake Tahoe and also for Heavenly. And one of the things about these pre-attack plans, if I can pull this next slide up, here we go. So what we do in these pre-attack plans as first responders, these are all geo-referenced. So I can pull them up on my phone and see exactly where I am on the map at any particular point in time. We've pre-identified areas where we know we're going to have problems with vehicle ingress and egress, where water sources are for firefighters, where temporary refuge areas are for people if we need to put people in a safe place while a fire passes. In addition to that, we've identified high priority protection zones such as schools and daycare facilities and things along those lines. What's really nice about this is any first responders that come into the Lake Tahoe Basin can have access to this so they know where they are, they know where fuels reduction projects have been done on the landscape, and it gives them more situational awareness on where things are in the landscape that are going to benefit not only fire but law enforcement as well. So with that, we've also done a lot of defensible space inspections, which you'll hear about later, and all the fire agencies use one common platform to collect information on defensible space inspections, and we're very aggressive in that and making sure that we work with property owners on defensible space, and that will be talked about later as well. So one of the things I want to say is we're not here to scare you. We're here to prepare you. And so even though it is a scary thing, the more prepared we are, the better off we will all be moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Steve Burns. I'm the Forest Fire Management Officer for the U.S. Forest Service, Lake Tahoe Basin here. I've been assigned 4 topics and have 8 minutes to do it, so I'm going to try and fit it into my 9 slides here. Pretty much, good segue from Chris's presentation is what we've done as far as treating adjacent to communities around Lake Tahoe. There was a lot of treatments that went on before the Angora fire, but this unfortunately is kind of blurry for you, but since 2008 to 2018, we've treated over 24,600 acres of fuels reduction, hazardous fuels retreatment, and veg treatments around the lake, and that's pretty substantial. So we've made it pretty far around the lake, and if you look at the bottom of the slide, you'll see a high concentration of a lot of those projects have happened in the South Shore. Planned in the future, anywhere from 1 to 5 years out, in the scoping and the NEPA process that has already been done, we have planned treatments for about another 21,000 more acres to be done. And of that, 10,000 of those acres would be pretty much focused towards the South Shore of Lake Tahoe. So, the thing about prescribed burning is we've pretty much made a lap around the lake and did a lot of treatment. We have a lot more to do. But, I use the analogy of the Golden Gate Bridge when they start painting it on one edge of the bridge and they get all the way to the other side, and 5 years later, you need to go back and start painting over again. So kind of use that thought process of when we do treat fuels, they grow back. So we have to go and reintroduce treatments into those areas. And part of that 10,000 acres, we're probably going to go a little bit heavier and then clean up where we've already been. Okay. Okay, so there's several reasons why we do our fuels reduction and vegetation management. Probably the 2 that are most important to you are on the top there is to improve the defensible space that's around the communities and then reduce the risk of catastrophic fire. The other portions are to improve the forest health and improve stream environment zones, and that'll help all reduce the catastrophic fire. Okay, so improving defensible space. So a lot of our projects that we have planned and do, we try and have it in conjunction with cooperating treatments adjacent to the communities, and that can complement those treatments also. Also in those areas, we create a safe place for our firefighters to actually possibly engage the fire, where the fires come out of the crowns, hopefully, and actually we can get it onto a ground fire and control it more easily. You know, ideally, our idea of a defensible space is where you've treated enough that your home could survive without firefighters with an engine in your driveway. Because we just don't have enough fire engines to put a fire engine in every driveway. So that's the biggest part of defensible space. Okay, to reduce the amount of catastrophic wildfire, we want to thin this out. You know, we want to get rid of the density that we have, the tree density. We want to reduce some of the surface fuels that have ladders that will ladder the fuel up into the crowns. Once the fire's up in the crowns, it's much more hard to control. We're looking at reducing the intensity and severity of a wildfire. So the other reason why we do some fuels reduction and prescribed fire is we want to lessen the competition that the trees have for water and nutrients in the soil. You know, another analogy would be, you know, if you have a big glass of water and you have 40 straws on it and people drinking off of it, you're going to get X amount of water. But if you reduce that to 10 straws, that's going to be a lot more benefit in water and nutrients to the trees themselves. Healthier trees are more resilient. Healthier trees are, they can fight off susceptibility to insects and disease, and they're higher tolerant to drought. And also, fire reintroduces back fire into the ecosystem. So we have a few different methods that we use to do fuels treatment. Two of those methods are mechanical and hand thinning. Mechanical, we use a process of either mastication or whole tree yarding, and then we'll either pile it or masticate the fuels. Hand thinning, we generally do that and make piles on some of the steeper slopes around the basin, and both methods are to remove biomass. This is just a picture of an example of a machine pile burning, and generally the machine piles we have out in our more open areas. So the purpose is to consume the piles by burning and to remove the fire, the biomass. It also reintroduces fire back into our ecosystem. So the process. So we have contracted crews, we have force account crews, we have other folks that'll come and we'll thin it out, create the piles. The piles generally need 1 to 3 years to cure before we can burn them. So if there's the issue of like why are the piles so long, it's because they need to cure. And then when we do burn them, it's following a strict science-based prescription that takes into account weather, fuels, smoke dispersal, and such. Got to move along. I got my thing. So, supposed to talk a little bit about the Tahoe fire cameras and Alert Tahoe. So basically, we were one of the pilot programs here through the El Dorado National Forest and Camino in partnership with the UNR Seismic. They came in about 2010, started putting up a few cameras in the basin. Today, I think there's probably at least 12 or 13 around the basin, and we're seeming to get 1 or 2 more each year. These are incredible tools. This right here, there's a website on the bottom. This is a public website. You can go to this website, and you can click on one of the cameras facing anywhere around the lake, and you can look at smoke. You can look at if you hear something on the radio or whatever, you'll be able to go onto a public site and look at the cameras yourself. These cameras with the technology now is allowing us to, so two cameras can actually triangulate and pinpoint a location of a fire. This is really going to help us out in locating these fires and getting to them early. Okay. Another one of my topics was multi-jurisdictional fires. So basically, here in the basin, we have 3 jurisdictions, the federal jurisdiction, the state jurisdiction, and your local responsibility. And these are lands that are adjacent to each other and mutual threat. I think Chief Alameda is going to go into unified command pretty heavily, but once we're in a major fire in the basin, we pretty much go into unified command pretty much right off the bat. The FRA portion of the lake, we have 78% of the lands, and as far as the protection of it, and quite a bit of that land is in the southern part. Last slide on Hurricane. And then just to explain urban expansion, how we got more people moving into the urban. Thank you.
I think that's it. Jim Drennan, I'm your current interim fire chief in the city. Tonight I'm going to be talking about pre-positioning of local government resources, red flag staffing, and our current threats in the city. Before I get into pre-positioning, I just wanted to give a quick overview of how the mutual aid system in the state works. In a nutshell, the Master Mutual Aid System was put together in California back in the 1950s. And there hadn't been much in the way of changing that system over the last several decades until about a year or two ago. And our former fire chief, Jeff Meston, through Cal Chiefs and work with OES, so Cal Chiefs Association in the state and Office of Emergency Services, coupled with CAL FIRE, developed a plan for local resource move-ups. And so currently, if you have a fire anywhere in the state, we can share resources around the state. Every fire agency in the room is part of the Master Mutual Aid System. That's a reactionary system, by and large, which means that you have a fire in Paradise. Once the fire starts, we then send resources as requested. The idea behind some of this move-up plan was that we could identify dangerous fire behavior across the state and address that by pre-positioning resources. CAL FIRE has actually been doing this excuse me, for a long time with their resources. And some Southern California larger agencies have been able to do that sort of on their own. But now we actually have a mechanism in the state, and there's several criteria for that, most of which is based on fire weather and what we're concerned with red flag type staffing. That's low humidities, high winds, dried out fuels, and whatnot. Here in the city, when we talk about pre-positioning and being available for that, I'll go ahead and move my slide there. There's some of the criteria there. With our staffing for red flag, city staff's out at 2 fire stations at the moment. That staffing level is at about 8 on-duty folks, and through a lot of community support, council support, and leadership within the city government, we've been reevaluating that need, and as you may or may not be aware, we're looking to reopen Fire Station 2 here in the very short time frame. That will effectively put 3 more people on the floor available for immediate response. When we look at the events in Paradise, they were horrific for a number of reasons. We lost 86 people, I think, in that fire. For those of us in the fire service, we're all pretty shocked that number was 86 and not 186. And that can really be attributed to the on-duty crews and the immediate response by the resources that were there. You had horrific conditions, high winds, and a very difficult event to mitigate. So what we've identified in the city is that we need to upstaff that, and that's what that red flag staffing looks like. So back to that slide there. So when we see red flag conditions in the city, we will routinely upstaff. At a minimum, that's 1 additional engine with 4 personnel. They're in a status of patrolling the area. Their entire reason for being there is immediate response to any kind of a vegetation fire. We'll obviously use them to augment staffing for other events as needed, but the intent of that red flag staffing is so that we have a much more rapid response to anything here in the basin or in the South Shore. The idea there is keeping small fires small and not allowing them to get up into what they described as ladder fuels and into the ground, where they become very difficult to fight. So with our augmented staffing coming here soon with Station 2, coupled with the fact that we will be patrolling anytime we have a red flag event, we should have some pretty stout staffing here in the city. With that, we also have very robust mutual aid agreements with our neighbors, both east and west, and both of those agencies are also following similar models where they attempt to upstaff during those events. CAL FIRE will also bring resources up into the basin during those timeframes. The Forest Service makes sure that they're upstaffed. So all of the agencies involved are extremely aware of the conditions and of the threat, and we act accordingly. We have some handouts. I think they're here today that kind of explain what we're talking about, red flag staffing and conditions that we look for and what we're doing, why you would see a Type 3 engine driving through town with a red flag hanging off the back of it. And then as far as the last topic here, threats to the city. I think most of us are here tonight because they're concerned about what does an evacuation look like? What sort of conditions would preempt evacuating? The obvious one is a vegetation fire, a large fire in the area, Angora type fire event. Evacuation and moving people on the highway, that lands on law enforcement, but every agency up here is all very vested in that. The types of threats that we're most concerned about, obviously, are vegetation fires, but we're also concerned about other events, things like what we saw in Vegas with the Route 91 incident, trying to move large numbers of people out of the area. So that's largely what this whole forum is about, is discussing what that looks like. If you're thinking that we have a plan to move everybody out of the basin on July 4th, that's not an option. And so we're gonna talk about that. You'll hear terms like temporary refuge area. You'll hear us talking about which structures we're going to prioritize and why. I certainly invite you to ask as many questions as you can during the Q&A, because the presentations that we're giving will most certainly not hit everything that you want to hear. And I believe as far as the hazards go, that's the short list there. And with that, I'll turn this over to Lake Valley.
Thank you, Chief. You might have to help me. I forgot my glasses. Hi, I'm Tim Alameda, current chief of Lake Valley Fire. How many folks are in here from Lake Valley, Myers, Tahoe, Paradise? Okay, great. And I saw somebody from Colville, and how about folks from the city? Okay, and then we also have somebody from Meeks Bay. Right, very good. It's good to have you all here. Zephyr, yes, ma'am. Okay, which way do I go here? There we go. The first slide we have up here is talking about strike teams. If you go back to Los Angeles, back in the 1950s, 1960s, there were many fires down there. And they had a real problem with folks not understanding, different firefighters not understanding the same terms, terminology, so on and so forth, to try to organize themselves. They didn't even have the same radio communications. And they had disastrous fires down there. As a matter of fact, as a result of that, the state put together a project called Fire Scope, where they brought folks from the Forest Service, from then CDF, now CAL FIRE, from local agencies, so to get together to try to get common terminology to where everything kind of moved together. Strike team was one of them. And that's a simple situation where we take 5 pieces of equipment, 5 resources, in this situation with engines, plus a leader, strike team leader, and we move them around the state or around the jurisdictions to assist each other to combat fires or whatever it may be. And here in Lake Tahoe, we have something called the XTB. It's our little area that we work within. And sure enough, we can amass strike teams and move them from one side of the lake to the other, and we have. So that's kind of where that comes from. So if you see 5 pieces of equipment running through town, they're going somewhere. When we have the large fires throughout California and Nevada, we have done the same thing. We put strike teams together and we send them off to fight that fire, and then in response, they come back and help us with ours. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. Unified Command, again, fires like hurricanes, they don't respect city line, county line, or state line. They're going to move where they want to go, based upon the fuels and the weather and topography that's moving that fire. So same thing up here in Lake Tahoe. Matter of fact, my first day as the Lake Valley Fire Chief on October 13th, I think it was 2016, I got a telephone call about 12:30 at night saying, "Hey Chief, we have a forest fire major forest fire in the Spring Creek area. And I thought they were kidding me. And sure enough, we have ourselves a forest fire rolling. And Chris Anthony and Kit Bailey. Kit, where are you? From the Forest Service. So you had CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, and Lake Valley. We set up a unified command, and our command post was set up over in Baldwin Beach where you could see what was going on. And so that's not uncommon. It gets to the point where we even have incident management teams, depending on the type of the incident, and move them around the state or around the whole western United States or to Katrina or to wherever to try to organize and combat these fires. So that's what that's all about. With that, we also have the Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs Agreement. So within Lake Tahoe, we have the fire agencies of the city, the CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, North Tahoe, Tahoe Douglas, all the way down into Reno, throughout. They get together as the Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs. Not uncommon. If we went to Southern California, we went to Idaho, we would find the same type of organizations. We get together, we meet once a month, we compare notes, we extend that invitation out into the National Weather Service, to the Tahoe Resource Conservation District, to BLM, you name it. Whoever has an interest in protecting this lake and protecting the environment, they're in the game. And so we share the resources, so on and so forth. That's Dr. Kent from UNR, that's how he came. He came to one of the meetings and said, I have a way to provide cameras so you guys can see the fires before, when they first start. We couldn't believe it when we saw it. Fantastic. So let me go. So there's some of the agencies that are represented that I mentioned within the Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs. It's an association that's been going on since the 60s. It evolves with the climate that we're involved in. So that's what I wanted to share with you this evening, and we'll go over to the Sheriff's Department and talk about another important item here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to talk to you about our emergency alert system, our emergency notification system that we currently use for the Sheriff's Department, and that's the Code Red. This is a system that we currently have a contract through 2022 with. And this, when we buy these contracts and we go into an agreement with them under federal law, the day we get that contract, every single hard line that's in the county, everyone that's got a copper line that's been in your house forever, you're automatically in the system. It's an automatic thing. It's a federal law. We rarely ever have any issues with that. So we have a lot of questions about how do I get into your system? Most of you are already in the system. And I'll apologize if I'm losing my voice because the pollen in the air is really wiping me out. But at the counties, I don't have the slide up here, but at ready.edso.org is where you go to register your cell phones and everything else. I have plenty of flyers over on the table. And you go to that system, and what you can do is you can register your cell phone to your physical address. So if you're down in Reno, you're over on the West Slope, or you're wherever, and we have an evacuation in your area and we send out a Code Red notification, you will get that on your cell phone. It comes in texts, it comes in emails, and it comes as a voicemail or a phone call. One of the issues that we're having with all systems, not just Code Red, is everybody's sick and tired of robocalls. So they buy these really fancy, awesome programs that wipe out robocalls. Well, guess what else it wipes out? It wipes out your emergency notification. So most of these programs have a mechanism where you can go in and add the number to it that will accept it. So when you see that number come up, you'll know it says it's ours. You need to make sure that if you have one of those systems that you add that phone number to it so that you will obviously get our calls when we send them out. Something that we've done recently that's really important, that we've had this for quite a while, is what we refer to as IPAWS. And you've heard this in the news. You've heard a lot about WIA and IPAWS. IPAWS is the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It's a federal system that, as a very confusing diagram over here from FEMA explains, is that at a local level, when I pull up on my computer screen and I'm getting ready to do an activation for, say, the Tahoe Basin, I can click a box that says iPause, and when I send out my notification that goes to all your phones, if I select that box, it goes through this system and comes out in all of these other systems that you see, NOAA, Internet, the WIA system, the emergency alert system that all of you who grew up with the terrible noise on the TV that interrupted when you're in a very important part of your show and they come on with the emergency broadcast system, that is integrated into our system. The latest part that we have is the WIA, which is the wireless emergency alert system, which is an incredible tool, but it's new. And with any new technology, we're learning its limitations. But what it does is when we select WIA, when we do a code red notification, it sends out a blanket alert to every cell phone in that area. Not just the ones registered, but every single one. That is critically important in the basin when you have such a high transient traffic, tourist traffic up here that none of these people are registered in our systems. So they're up here, we have a fire, and we send out evacuation notices. All you guys know what to do, and you're going to be doing it. And they're going to be going, what's everybody doing? So we punch the WIA in, and it goes to them. The limitation of WIA is it's cellular based. If the cell towers go down because the fire's burning them, WIA goes offline. It doesn't work if there is no cell coverage. So that is one of the limitations of WIA. So the last thing I want to touch on before I pass on is we also do red flag staffing for the sheriff's office, and especially within OES. Critically important for us is fire is a Darwinistic world. You learn from the mistakes of others. We always study every single case throughout the state, the nation, and try to take the best practices and put it into place for us. We've learned that early warning is best warning. The sooner you folks get the notice to get out of Dodge or do whatever we need you to do, the better off you are. So in response to that, when the fire department sends up, or NOAA or the National Weather Service or anybody starts sending out the notifications, if we have a red flag watch, we're going to have red flag weather. Our Office of Emergency Services will staff up our EOC so we have somebody ready, available, pretty much 24/7, so that when a fire breaks out at 9 p.m., 2 a.m., whatever time it is, or any other disaster for that matter, that we are ready to send out the notifications as soon as possible. And we will utilize iPause and WIA if we ever run into a situation like Paradise, the Carr Fire, Napa Sonoma fires. We're going to pull the big red handle and we're going to send out every single notification there is. We're not going to delay it. We're going to send it. We think that's in the best interest of you, and it helps us get our job done, catching up with the disaster if we do that. I think that's all I have for now. I will be around for questions. Before I do go, I do want to introduce two important people that they're the faces of the Sheriff's Department up here in Tahoe, and there's actually three, and I'm going to throw him in because he snuck in, is over in the corner, Lieutenant Brian Brown, standing by the door. He's the lieutenant of the Tahoe substation, and he will be the face of that you will see most likely when we have a disaster up here until we can get more resources in here. Sergeant Matt Harwood, standing up in the bleachers, is one of our patrol sergeants who will be out in the field going door to door to make sure that you get the notifications. And down in front, Greg Almos, Deputy Greg Almos, is my OES deputy for the Tahoe Basin. He'll be running the show until we can get up here and backstop him. I appreciate you guys being here. This is the single most important thing you can do right now, is being in here. It's the connections you make in this room and the information you gather tonight that puts you 10 steps ahead of everybody else who's been through this before. Preparation is everything in these emergency situations. And doing this, you guys are taking a huge step in the right direction. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, LT. Again, my name is David Stevenson. I'm a lieutenant with the South Lake Tahoe Police Department. So I only have one slide tonight. Just click it forward for me. Okay. There. Oh, hit it one more time. I think it's got some awesome motion. There we go. It really is a lot of information. What we're talking about is the local boots on the ground, people working that day when something happens. The lieutenant pointed out a couple on the county side. You have your local police department. We have CHP. We all have people working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I broke my slide up into basically two sides. I call it the now and the later. And I think most of us are in here for the now. That's when the incident first occurs. What's going to happen? We're talking about evacuations tonight, so we'll assume it's an incident that is going to involve evacuations. We don't have a set plan about what our evacuation plan is going to be, because you never know what the evacuation plan is going to be, because the incident is going to dictate what the evacuation plan is. That's why the notification systems are important. That's why the unified command system is important, and all those things happen immediately. We have 3 or 4 police officers and 1 sergeant working at any one time in the city. I know the county's got about 3 more. CHP's got 2 or 3 more. Got some Forest Service law enforcement sometimes working. If it's during the week, during the day, we'll have 4 or 5 detectives who all have a vehicle, 2 lieutenants. We have 1 to 3 CSOs. If I count all that up in my head, it's roughly 18 to 20 bodies available to respond within minutes at a command post where a fire has started and we need to start evacuating. And that's what we do. We connect with fire and we support them. We connect with them. They tell us we need this section of the city or the county evacuated, and that's what we start to do. All those systems, the notification systems begin, and we organize our people and send them out. South Lake Tahoe Police is going to go to the county. The county comes into the city. CHP goes everywhere. We work well together. We've worked well for years together. I know these guys. I work with them for a lot of years. I've worked with other members in their department for a lot of years. So I know people have a lot of questions about evacuation routes, and someone said something about getting everybody out of the basin on the 4th of July. It's not going to happen. You're right, it's not going to happen. So listen to the announcements, be prepared, have a plan. Know there's certainly different levels of an evacuation plan, and we will physically be on the ground ready to assist. Whether it's having to cause major arteries in town to go 2 lanes in one direction instead of 1, which is what we did during the Angora fire to get the Keys community out of there much faster than it would have taken. Those little steps, we physically will direct traffic. We will go door to door. Know your neighbors. Know if there's persons with disability or mobility issues. We'll be there to help them and support whatever the other needs are. So the later part is a lot less exciting. I'm not going to really cover that. It has to do with opening up the EOC, the days, the weeks of a fire event, and what it takes to really see one of these incidents through completion. So I will be available here as well when it's completed.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. I wanted to go over a little bit of law enforcement, mutual aid, and how the Highway Patrol responds with state resources in a large-scale event like Angora Fire. Just as many here have said, mutual aid is the fire side has a process they go through. The law enforcement side has a process that they go through as well. So a law enforcement mutual aid is a predetermined process. Excuse me, I didn't have one slide. Okay. Law enforcement mutual aid has a process, and the county and the city has to go through a process of getting resources, as the lieutenant here said, of who's working and get those resources heading just like the CHP does. Once those resources are tapped, I would say, then the county sheriff is designated to go to a county regional mutual aid system. And once the county resources for that mutual aid region have been requested and determined how many bodies or how much resources can be sent, then it goes to the state law enforcement, and then it goes to the federal law enforcement for action. The state is broken up into different mutual aid regions. The region that covers South Lake Tahoe is Region 4, if you can see that on the screen. That region is broken up into approximately 11, I believe, counties. So when the county sheriff determines they need to reach out, they first go to this region. And when that region has decided how many resources or personnel that they can send, Then they reach out to the Office of Emergency Services through the state of California, who reports directly to the governor. The governor authorizes the law enforcement services of the state, which is the California Highway Patrol. And the state's resources will start responding. So the responsibilities that we have as CHP, our local office here will start responding immediately, just as the office, not the full resources of the state until that is approved. So in those situations, the Highway Patrol falls underneath the sheriff department in the mutual aid or in the unified command. So we carry out the missions that they want us to help them with. Primarily, we focus, until that happens, we focus on traffic and life-saving efforts in the area. And the life-saving efforts pretty much opens it up to whatever we need to do. Okay, so we're not restricted from doing anything. We start sending resources immediately. Those resources, as commander, I can put our office on what we call a tactical alert. The tactical alert cancels days off, gets folks in, and provides immediate services while we're determining and spooling up the rest of the state's resources. So our divisions, the state is broken up for the Highway Patrol. We have 8 field divisions in addition to many administrative divisions, but those field divisions have anywhere between 17 and 25 area commands like we have up here, but the majority of them are in large cities. So the staffing capacities are much more than 2 to 3 to 4, which we all have up here. So when those resources, even though it may take just probably a matter of 30 minutes to get the mutual aid approved for them to come up, as commander, I can access those resources, put a division on tactical alert as well, and we have predetermined processes to get those resources up here very quickly. Once the resources of the state have been approved, I can't tell you how many people that all over the state, especially with the divisions that are closest here, just send mass amounts of resources. And some of the items that, if it's up there, we'll provide whatever the mission needs that the sheriff gives us. Is traffic direction, traffic control points. Some of these are after the fire. Air operations, evacuation assistance, emergency escorts for buses or fire trucks or any resources, security service for the area, investigative services if needed. A lot of times the local law enforcement agencies are overwhelmed with their own folks being caught up in emergency situations. For instance, the Chico or Paradise Fire, we had the majority of all the allied agencies had their homes burned, and the Highway Patrol went in and took over as the local law enforcement and acted as the chief of police, and we provide those services once all those folks can come up, and they come up very quickly. And we also have paramedics and EMTs that help. So when these things happen, even though it takes, and it sounds like it takes a lot to get the state resources activated, but they truly don't. These decisions get made very quickly. The county sheriffs in these regions know what their resources that are available, and it very quickly gets to the governor who authorizes. So we can begin moving toward the emergency as those other resources are spooling up. Also, our department has special response teams that are all pre-designated. They have all their equipments in their car. They don't have to go back and get anything extra. Those resources get tapped, and wherever they are, they begin driving up here. So it's basically driving time for an emergency vehicle to get up here, and they go to work right away. And I believe that's... Thank you.
Hey, welcome to the middle school. A little home court advantage here, home of the Timberwolves. I would like to just simply say, first off, I appreciate, on behalf of the school district, like to say, and appreciate Chief Anthony for the amount of time that's gone into this, and all of the agencies that have taken time in this effort. So as a school district, we greatly appreciate that. So thank you. Right off the top here, I would like to just remind folks, here we are. That as public employees, we become emergency service workers in the event of a declared emergency, period. Okay, so we go from teaching class and whatnot that goes on at a school to emergency service workers. That is something we discuss as staff and the adults there on campus, and we just want folks to know in the community and parents that are here tonight that we shift gears very quickly when needed. Points of discussion there. I'm going to share just some broad strokes there with you. Going to go over a little bit with the communication part with parents and guardians. Very important. Going to share what we have planned here in the way of visiting each campus with battalion chiefs, reunification with students in the event of a crisis such as we're talking tonight. I'm also going to spend a moment talking about revision of our crisis response plan as a district and site by site, and then I would like to recognize many of the agencies that have been involved. So very important, communication there at the top. If you're a parent, you know what Aries Communications is, and it's a tool that we have that we've added to this year. And at times, maybe some folks out there nodding their head, we use it a bit too often, I would say sometimes, but it is effective. It's an effective system that has been timely, and we've really exercised that. Phone, text, and email alike. And we have the ability to choose the options, and both on the receiving end and sending end with that. Also, we'll continue to post information on our websites. We have a district website in addition to all of our schools have websites, and we do and would, in case of an emergency, post information there on the front page of our websites. If that were to go down, if cell towers weren't working and online didn't work, we would be looking to establish physical locations where folks could get information about reunification and directives to do that. We do currently have 2 sites identified by the Red Cross here in town, both the high school and the middle school. And in 17, we did exercise that. Red Cross, we assisted some folks in need when we had the flood here. So those 2 sites are available for that, and we would be communicating that with community where they could receive both support and short-term shelter. Everything we communicate there would be in both languages, English and Spanish. So this is something I am greatly looking forward to as crisis response coordinator here for the district. In later part of May, hope to take a handful of battalion chiefs with me and go site by site, okay, taking a look at specific things for each and every one of our sites, including what are the fuels around each school, the structures of the building, the roof, what are the possible shelter options. So creating or revising, I should say, plans for each and every site. I like that for several reasons. I also like it. I like it first and foremost because folks that are going to be telling us what to do in an emergency are aware very much of what they're dealing with. So when they call me and tell me I need to evacuate a particular school, we're on the same page as to the capability of that school, limitations. So that is set to happen here in May. Next piece here. These are probably a little bit difficult to see. Response options for each district site, and these folks are in no particular order, but they are all possibilities. Our job there at the school district is to be ready to utilize one or more of the following options. First there, to evacuate and transport kids, staff via district transportation. We have 24 buses, 24 drivers. We also have 3 mechanics and our director that I see out there, Christy Block. Thank you for making it, Christy. Ran the numbers on this. Again, just to be sure here, beginning of the year, we have the capability of transporting over 2,000 people in one trip. Okay, 2,000 kiddos and staff in one trip. So if I need to evacuate, for example, Sierra House, the Magnet, the high school in Tallac, we can do that in one trip. Okay. Other options here, or I will mention a couple of other things there. We do have a time frame that we're working with of about 45 minutes. That would be the longest point in time. We do have some ideas there we're looking to reduce that with, one of which involves, and it was discussed earlier, announcement of a red flag day, whereby we would receive notification of that, one of those days that has perhaps the most potential for an incident. That helps us to better respond faster, okay? So look forward to hopefully implementing that. And then always, as a preventative measure, all buses are fueled at the end of every day and, of course, before a weekend so that they can roll with a full tank at any time. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about reunification. After communications would go out, there would be specific instructions about where parents would be able to reunify with their student. We have sites here that you can see on the screen, some of which are nearby, right here in the basin, some of which are outside of the basin. And that would be the decision of both IC or Incident Command and the school district working together on what site would be selected, or sites, plural. One or two more items here for you tonight. I want to talk just for a moment about our revision of our crisis response plan. There's a great deal of work that's gone into revising not just this piece of our plan, but several of the other pieces in our plan, all of which are in lockstep, I would want you to know as a parent or community member, with recommendations that are put out by Homeland Security. There's been a great number of people in this community, some of which in this panel, that have assisted with that, and as a school district, we're very grateful for that. We appreciate the collaboration that has gone on. We appreciate the ongoing improvements around that. So very important to us that we revise each and every spring. And finally, a few folks in particular I'd like to thank on behalf of the school district, folks that have been involved from the beginning. FBI, we do have 2 or 3 agents here in town. They've been involved. Don't hesitate to show up to the school, help us with planning. It's been an excellent relationship. Barton Hospital, always very much involved. We've implemented Stop the Bleed training in a couple of our different sites. We're going to continue to do that. That's an effort that's going on across the nation. Both South Lake Tahoe Fire Department, Lake Valley, SLT Police, and El Dorado SO. I'd simply say thank you all.
All right. It's interesting. I like to echo what Justin said. I was sitting here reflecting on one of the last times I think I was in this building was a few nights after that fire in 2007, and it was a packed house, and there was a lot of us here that had been evacuated, and we really didn't know what the status was of our homes. And it's really nice to know that there's a group of professionals here and a community here that are here today to a previous point. One of the most important things. So I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm here to talk about, what the impact of an evacuation would be on a small community hospital. So for us, the big decision is how do we partner up? I've heard a term unified command. In some ways, we've already, I think, done that without the title, and that is to partner up with other agencies in the event of an evacuation. So Barton has essentially 5 memorandums of understanding with other hospital systems. And you can see them here on the slide. We've got arrangements with Marshall and Placerville, UC Davis and Sacramento, and then through the Mutual Aid Evacuation Agreement, we have arrangements with 3 hospitals in Nevada, Carson Valley Medical Center, Carson Tahoe, and Renown. And in addition to that, we also have arrangements throughout Gardnerville and Minden with long-term care facilities and skilled nursing facilities as well. For us, a big decision is when we evacuate, we've got some patients that are receiving active medical care and some that are in the hospital but are easier to transport. So the first are the more acute patients, and so our arrangement is with American Medical Response out of Sacramento, and that's part of the El Dorado County Evacuation Response Plan. And what that does is that just takes advantage of all the resources that are out there to really mobilize a strike team as it's dictated by the county to get people out. And again, the more acute or involved patients are always a big concern because they don't have a lot of the things that we think about. They don't have the mobility, and they also might be hooked up to equipment, oxygen, et cetera. So that's a big first step for us. The second is there's definitely some times where we have patients that are a little bit more mobile. They're not receiving active medical care, but they are in the hospital. And so we have arrangements with Lake Tahoe Unified School District, as Justin mentioned, and also the Tahoe Transportation District to utilize Blue Go to transport those types of patients. And so we feel like with the kind of a two-prong approach, you've got your more ill patients, your more acute patients out one avenue, and then you've got these other resources to get the ones that aren't receiving active medical care. This is probably becoming the toughest part for us, is estimating, just how many patients would require transport. I would say about 10 years ago, our summertime was probably when we had the lowest census in the hospital. We would typically have the peak amount of patients between January and May, and what we've been finding over the last 10 years because of things like a holiday around July 4th or just the activities that people can do during the summer, we have a lot more consistent census at the hospital. But you can see from the slide that we could have as few as 30 patients in the hospital and upwards of 90. And this does include both your acute surgical patients, but also your skilled nursing residents. So, 90 is something that strikes us from a hospital system as a concern because, again, this isn't always the situation where you would just place these individuals in a car and transport them. You might need ambulances. You certainly are going to need some higher level care to do that. So it is definitely a concern for us. Looking at, I'm a little behind on slides. Sorry, guys. So there's what we're talking about as far as estimating our patients. So you can see there we talked about again, a minimum of 30 and a maximum of 90 at the most busy times. If we start thinking about this is probably the biggest decision we have to make. And looking back to 2007, I was meeting with our CEO before this talk, and he reminded me that at that time we had been advised to shelter in place, and we asked, what would be the lead time to actually start transporting, and they told us about an hour. And so the hospital made the decision at that time to go ahead and start transporting some of the more acute patients. So we learned a lot from that. And what we did was we established, a hospital incident command for emergent situations, and our executive leadership team is who would make the ultimate decision. So they would rely on guidance from our command center staff, but also taking recommendations from a lot of the professionals and experts that have already talked tonight. So I think, from our standpoint, 2007 taught us a lot. Listening to some of the things that Chief Anthony talked about and the experiences that they've had just in the last few years is another opportunity for us to learn. I do want to also recognize Doug Dame. He told me not to do this, but he's actually the guy that makes all this happen. He's the smart guy, and I'm just the guy that talks about it. So if you have questions afterwards, make sure you find Doug. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Carly Murphy, the Fire Adapted Communities Coordinator at the Tahoe Resource Conservation District. I recognize that I am last, so I have one slide as well. I'll keep it quick. So the Tahoe Network of Fire Adapted Communities is really a way for residents and visitors to get connected to each other, as well as to all of the agencies that you see here, plus many other agencies, to prepare for wildfire on a community and a neighborhood level. As you've just heard, evacuation and emergency preparedness is really important, if not one of the most important things that we do. But it's not the only way to prepare for wildfire, so I just want to run through a few of the other things that you can do to prepare for wildfire. The first thing being making sure that emergency personnel can access and find your home in an emergency. Think about if there was smoke in the air, or if you're driving down the road, are you going to be able to find your home? Do you have those address labels and street signs accessible? The next piece is a majority of homes that are lost due to embers going and attaching to those sensitive parts of a structure, not necessarily that wall of flames that people often think of. So there are small construction techniques that you can do to reduce those ember vulnerabilities to your structure. Another thing is learning more about what's being done on public lands in your neighborhood as well as outside of your neighborhood, and supporting that work that's being done. Next one, and I know a lot of people are familiar with, is defensible space. So that's making sure that you're managing your vegetation in a way that is reducing the chance of wildfire coming from further out on your property to the structure itself. And there are defensible space inspections and shipping services available throughout different parts of Lake Tahoe. So if you're interested in learning about those services, you can come talk to us over at the yellow tablecloth when this is done, and we can point you in the right direction. Also, the last thing is being prepared for wildfire and evacuation, like we've just talked about. We have lots of resources on how to pack a go bag, how to sign up for emergency alerts, and how to create an evacuation plan for your family, your pets, your vulnerable populations. So, like I said, just come visit us at the yellow table at the end, and we can help answer some of those questions. So I'm sure at this point you all are thinking, what can you do right now? I know you just took in a lot of information. So I just wanted to run through a few things that you can do today to help prepare you for wildfire. So one of those being to come and talk to us. Another being sign up for our monthly newsletter, so you hear about other events like this one that are happening really frequently all around the Tahoe Basin. We do events on evacuation specifically, as well as on defensible space and how to change your structure in ways to reduce ember vulnerabilities. So we have lots of opportunities to learn more about all of these things. So sign up for our newsletter so you can become more engaged with those events. You can also become a neighborhood leader. We rely on neighborhood leaders who are able to go out and talk to their community about the things that you've learned today, and to help us plan neighborhood events where we can get everybody engaged together. So I encourage you all to talk to your neighbors and learn who will need help in an evacuation or who needs help with their defensible space. And we're happy to help you bring all these resources to those neighbors. And then last, and I think it's on the slide, is visit TahoeLivingWithFire.info. It's a great resource to learn all of this information that we're talking about today. We just redid it earlier this year, so it's really user-friendly, and it has a lot of great information. So I encourage you all to check it out. I think we are going to Q&A now.
Yes. So thank you all to all of our panelists today. That was a lot of really good information, and hopefully everyone in the crowd understands that there's a lot of people working very collaboratively and very fast on this issue. And are we completely prepared for the next emergency? Maybe or maybe not. But I can guarantee that all the people that you see up here today and all of their staff and their agencies are working very diligently to make sure that we are going to be prepared. And we're not starting from zero. There's already been a lot of work going done, and I really hope that was made clear tonight. So we're going to open it for Q&A. If you have a question, I really encourage you to raise your hand. We have someone walking around with a microphone. And to make sure that everyone gets a chance, just make sure you're keeping your questions very concise, so we have plenty of time for everyone to ask your questions.
So we're streaming live on Facebook and have had quite a few questions about the Code Red website. Where can folks find that to get the alerts and the texts? Limited mics.
So you can find that several different places. The easiest place, and I regret that I don't have a slide for it, is to go to ready.edso.org. That's edso.org. You can also just go to the Sheriff's Department website. At the bottom of the page, you'll see an emergency notification link. That will take you right to the link as well. The link is also on the regular county website, and it's also on, I believe, the Health and Human Services website. We put out a press notice usually twice a year, usually right before winter and then right before summer, with that site on there. So you can access it again off the Sheriff's Department's website, or you can go to the ready.edso.org. It takes you right to the link.
Hi, my name is Mark Martell. I have a question that I think is an elephant in the room to me, and that is power lines in the trees. I moved here a year and a half and was struck by how many power lines there are among the trees, and I understand that the Paradise Fire was started by power lines in the trees. So this is something I'm interested in working on. I'm an attorney. I want to try to do something about this. And I'm interested in everyone's reaction to whether we ought to bury the power lines in the Tahoe Basin. Thanks.
So power lines and trees. So certainly that's something that that we work really closely with Liberty Utilities on, to making sure that their vegetation clearance requirements are done in accordance with the Public Resources Code, which requires a certain amount of clearance along the power lines. And so when we actually do defensible space inspections in neighborhoods, our defensible space inspectors, they will also look at the power lines in those areas as well to make sure that there's no issues. If there are, we pass those on to Liberty, and they're actually very quick at coming out and dealing with any of the issues that we identify. They will do their own, obviously, inspections of their circuits also. And then also there's between CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, the California Tahoe Conservancy, there's a number of agencies that are working on a concept called resiliency corridors. And essentially what that is looking at all the power lines in the entire Lake Tahoe Basin. And Liberty, they would do the work that they're required to do under the law. And they're responsible for funding and paying for that work. But then also looking at expanding that work on private, state, and federal lands to essentially do shaded fuel breaks on both sides of those power lines, because we understand the risks that those potentially could pose. As an example, the Emerald Fire, which occurred a couple of years ago that Chief Alameda was referring to, that was actually a perfectly live Jeffrey pine that just simply snapped because the winds were so strong that night. There was no negligence on the part of Liberty, but those are the kind of conditions that we're facing, and so those are the kind of conditions that we're responding to as well with these resiliency corridors. We meet with Liberty Utilities on a regular basis. In fact, there was a meeting just this week that occurred at the Conservancy office with them, so that, again, we don't have those same kind of situations, because we realize the risk that it poses.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Durkin, and I live in Christmas Valley toward the south end. And my question is, we have neighbors who are housebound. They're elderly. One is in a wheelchair, and the gentleman is blind. And I'm far enough away that if we had to get out quickly, I don't think we could go and get them. Is there any place to register for housebound, relatively non-mobile people, so that either the police or the fire department knows where they are? So you wouldn't have to call them in the midst of trying to evacuate yourselves.
I would refer you to the county health department, our public health agency, our Health and Human Services. They keep track of our most vulnerable population. They have a registration system in there. I wish I had a representative here. I'm going off. I have somebody right there. Christine, come here. Okay. Christine will talk with you when we get done. Christine, can you stand up and wave? Everybody, Christine is my number one partner that when everything goes south, that's the first person I call, and the second one is a school. So Christine deals with our mass care and sheltering at the county level, and she would be able to address your question when we go to a break. Do you want to know that you guys want to know the answer right now? Evidently, they want to know the answer right now. Putting you on the spot, Christine.
Hi, Christine with El Dorado County Health and Human Services. So one of the things that we try and encourage folks to do, and it sounds like you've already done part of that, is getting to know your neighbors and understanding what neighbors' needs are. Because we know in a disaster, oftentimes our first responders, we've got a great response system up here, but our first responders are going to be our neighbors. So one of the things that we like to recommend is people figure out how they can help each other. So when you come to specific things like potentially housebound folks, we kind of have to dig a little bit deeper of how best we can help evacuate them, transport them, try and come up with solutions. How do they leave the house for a doctor's appointment and normal things, and try and see how we can put that into practice in an emergency. So happy to talk a little bit further, but really just want to encourage folks to get to know their neighbors and help each other, because that's, if we have a community that's resilient and can help each other, that's really going to help us be successful.
I know you were next.
My name is Dan Brown. I have two questions. One, the South Tahoe Public Utility District isn't here, so they can't answer anything about capacity and flow with the fire hydrants in the city and in the county, and hopefully somebody can answer that question. And I was at Chief Anthony's talk yesterday at the TRPA, and he had a slide yesterday that showed the 20 most vulnerable areas or cities within the state. And we were considered number one in relation to like the Camp Fire. And I was wondering if you could talk a little more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, John Teal, General Manager, South Tahoe PD. So we're in the process of improving our system. Right now, about 10% of our system does not have what we consider adequate fire flow. So that's 750 gallons per minute. So that 10% has some, but we're looking for a higher level. So we're in the process of making those improvements over the next 10 years. And our board is committed to making that happen. You know, well, the age of the hydrant does not really affect flow. Sure. Right. So, you know, we looked at two types of fires up here. One is a wildfire that's coming into our community. And then we have the fire that starts from a structure and moves out. So really our system in town is affecting that second type of fire. So we're trying to get on that structural fire as soon as possible, providing the water for our local resources to fight that fire. So we're working, you know, with Lake Valley, with the city fire department and others to identify those areas in the greatest need. And again, in the next our fire system, our suppression system, our infrastructure has never been better than it is today. The district began taking over the water system in the 70s, and through your rate, to the rates that you've been paying over the years, we've improved the system significantly in those 40 years. So looking at our risk today, we continue to improve our system, and I think looking ahead 10 years, it's going to be community-wide fire flow and protection.
So yesterday I gave a presentation to the TRPA Governing Board about looking at regulatory change as it relates to being able to implement more fuels reduction and forest health projects across the landscape. And so I don't quite recall the slide that you're referring to, but one of the slides that I did show was there was 35 priority projects that CAL FIRE identified throughout the state that came from a report that was put out on February 22nd by the department. And then on March 22nd of this year, the governor did an emergency proclamation which activated essentially the National Guard in conjunction with CAL FIRE to start working immediately on these projects, and it actually provided some regulatory relief for us to do that work as well. One of the questions you may have is one of those 35 projects here in the Lake Tahoe Basin. No, it is not. And one of the things that's unique about Lake Tahoe, and it really is, when you look, as Chief Burns showed you that map of all the fuels reduction work that has been done around the lake, it's incredible. And the only reason we have so much work that has been done is because of all the work that these agencies do to allocate resources for fuels reduction work in that wildland-urban interface area on those private and state urban lots that we all live next to, whether it's a conservancy lot or a Forest Service lot. The work that State Parks does, there's a lot of money that has been coming into the basin over the years to do that work. But there's still more work to do. As Chief Burns mentioned, it is like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, you have to stay on top of it all the time. So we are definitely heading in the right direction, but we also need to. Oh, that right there. Okay, so what you're showing right there is. Yeah, who's next? Yeah, so that diagram is something that I put together after the Napa and Sonoma fires. So that's the Atlas Tubbs and Nuns fire. And as I was driving through that valley during those fires, I was thinking about how, what would this kind of fire situation look like in the Lake Tahoe Basin? And so after I put that graphic together, I kind of held on to it because it seemed a little bit over the top, and I didn't want to scare anyone. But then, as we moved into 2018, not only did we have a repeat, but we obviously had something that was far worse. And so it really proves that the point that I'm trying to make with that who's next is, there is a community that will be impacted by a fire next year. And so it's really important that at a local level, we are prepared for that. We certainly all hope that it doesn't happen, but if it does, we need to do everything that we possibly can among all the agencies that are sitting up here, as well as all of you out here, to be prepared for that.
Can you give me just a minute, folks? Hey, Brad, our fire marshal for Lake Valley. Yeah, the lady is on this right here, third row in. Ma'am, yes, would you raise your hand, ma'am? Yeah, the lady in the blue, third row. Yeah, you see her, Brad? Ma'am, we want to get you in our iPod system so that we can identify those folks that need assistance. Okay, it'd be in our pre-action plan. Then that's the fire marshal right there. He's the mayor of Myers. He'll take care of that for you.
Is that any better? There's really no reason we can't keep that in our vehicles as incident commanders. As we come together, the agencies in a unified command, that we can get that to the law enforcement agencies of known addresses that would need that help. It's fixable tonight.
How can I get in touch with you with this information?
I'll meet you afterwards. Our station number 577-3737. We can set that program up fairly quickly and start calling in, and with the footprint of Lake Valley, fix it. Do it.
And we'll make sure that not just for you, but for anyone that would be interested in having someone signed up on that list, we'll make sure when these materials go out, when the video goes out, that information on how to get on that list is included. And make sure you find him. He'll find you after we're done with the Q&A
Yes.
and get your contact info and get you signed up.
Thank you for responding, and thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm Jenny Albanese. I live in the North Truckee area. I was in the 2007 fire, and I just read in the Mountain Views, I mean, we have heavy tourists coming in the summertime. Everybody discovered Lake Tahoe, and it's compared to Yosemite and other national parks, how much tourists we get every year. And it's kind of scary, even if we know as locals how to get out of a fire situation and how to prepare, what do we do with this massive influx of tourists coming in all the time? So I think we need to have a different solution, some kind of red flag or something if there is a fire that tourists simply cannot come, or we cannot be like a national park who can just be closed. Nobody can come in because of fire warning. But what can we do? Can we think out of the box to think about solutions for this influx of high tourism in high fire times? What can we do to protect that not so many people are coming in?
So, ma'am, you live on North Upper Truckee?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you at the community meeting we had at the 3 Cs, and we talked about traffic issues in Myers? We had that. Was anybody at that meeting? We had that just a while ago. Yeah, and at that meeting, I had discussed that, one of our big issues was equipment, and we would use lights and siren to try to work our way through. That was before February, when Steve Pavanage, our ops chief, where are you, Steve? You over there? Called me and said, it's so bad right now, we can't make it. Game changer. At the last fire board meeting, I asked the fire board, based upon our battalion chief's information, to go to the county supervisors and work with us so that we can declare local emergencies. This is a big run here. We're going to go talk to the sheriff about it. Declare local emergencies so we can shut down these roads to tourists that are getting on the side roads, specifically North Upper Truckee, Mandan, and Apache. We have to be able to make our 911 calls. I'm not sure how that goes, but we're going to kick it up to the next level, and that comes from our operations chief and our fire marshal coming back to us. So we'll get back to you on that through our next fire board meetings coming up the road. But I'm with you on that. The February snows were incredible. There was no getting around it, and a lot of folks got themselves trapped and basically locked up Myers. Red flag warning, same situation. So we'll talk about, I'm not a traffic manager. I'm not a community planner. I'm reacting to the information that's coming from our fire captains, our battalion chiefs, that the situation for us, the traffic has gone up a little bit more. So we're going to get some help, and we're working on it right now.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Eder Vasquez, and my question is mainly for the city of South Lake Tahoe, maybe Devin. As we learned from Chief Alameda, effective communication is crucial during this event, correct? And Mr. Sunino shared that communication will be distributed in English and Spanish. Does the city have a plan to communicate effectively and in a timely manner for our limited English proficient community members, as well as hard of hearing community members, as being part of the mission of the city of South Lake Tahoe?
I can answer that the Code Red system that we'll be using is multilingual, and we just have to make that selection when we do it, and we do that. We're working with not just Code Red, but with every single emergency notification system to make it as versatile and as widespread as we can. And we want that in not just the voice that goes out, but the email and the text and everything. So we recognize that, and we have that incorporated into our system. We're working with every one of them to make it as best as we can, to get the information out as clear as we can.
Do we have any other?
I'm just going to speak to that really quick. So what we've seen on some of these really large damaging fires is specifically communications problems, specifically with the Latino population. And so as part of this planning process, sat down with Carly, Susie Coker, and some other folks, and we want to do something similar to this at the Family Resource Center later in May. To be able to also communicate this information to the Spanish-speaking community here in South Lake Tahoe, because we feel that that's very important to be able to do that. So as soon as we're done with this here, then we're going to start moving on to that as well. I asked, we should have some Spanish-speaking material as well. CAL FIRE does put that out, as well as other agencies also. So it's a huge need, and we want to make sure that we fill that.
And then finally, I would also encourage yourself or any other members of the Hispanic community to sign up with Carly to become a community leader through the Fire to Adapted Communities program, because I'm sure that that's a big need for the program, is people that are tapped into that community as a resource.
So I also live out in Myers. I'm actually on Elks Club, so I have 4 ways out of my house. But as anyone in Myers knows, sometimes it takes 5 hours to get to the Y to our house. And I just had 2 questions on getting people out. One is on the communication as well. Most people get on their cell phone, they're trying to figure out the way out. It seems like it'd be very useful for the information to keep flowing of like, okay, please take 89, please take 50, please go this way. Like, otherwise people are going to be jamming their own cell phone. So I just think that would be useful to keep directing people which way to go. And the same with the school, like when we had a gas outage at Bijou, they said, come to school, but don't take Glenwood, that's where the power's out, or, that information is very helpful to direct people. And the other question I had is on physically, on the roads, like we said, we would have, like Highway 50 would be going both directions out of the basin, but could we even utilize space on the side of the roads if, like, things are at a complete standstill, and should we be clearing the trees that are on the side to facilitate access and to also keep the fire away from the roads? I mean, we saw pictures from Paradise of the trees right up against the roads that were on fire. I just wondered if you've been thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, touching on your 2 points, I know that the communication systems that we're talking about today, the alert, the emergency text, those are given priority within the system. So if everyone's on their phones, and we know 4th of July weekend, everyone's on their phone, service crawls, it stops, it's super slow. These systems are given priority on the back end, so they're given the first route. They don't run into those same issues of having to wait for everyone else's cell phone data to download. So that piece, and then with the evacuations and turning the routes. Not only are we looking at that, we're looking at the shoulders, evacuation routes. We're also, when we're looking at construction of new bike paths and bike routes, siting and sizing those properly so they can either be used as a secondary emergency vehicle access, so the police trucks and the fire car, the police cars and the fire trucks can get to neighborhoods when the roads are backed up, and then also potentially acting as another evacuation route for residents.
Hi, my name is Ben. I moved here from Paradise. I'm a survivor of the Camp Fire, and I just wanted to first say thank you to all of your respective departments, any of your brothers and sisters that helped save thousands of lives in my community. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you very, very much. My first question is, I know that my experience is very violent, very unique situation, but we did see that there was a gross failure of the warning system that did go out to the community members. So I was just wondering what have we learned from that experience, and how are we implementing that here in South Lake Tahoe?
So yeah, the Code Red system that we have, it is the same system they have up there. One of the things we learned is it is a wireless-based system. So when the fires burn the cell towers, we lose the capability of putting out some notifications that go out to the wireless section. One of the lessons we learned, and we're seeing it spreading quickly across the county, is that the wireless providers recognize that, and they're doubling and tripling their cell tower sites. They're trying to. That's one of the things they're pushing out first and foremost. We test ours regularly internally. We are rapidly transitioning to where we're going to test this regularly externally, to where every single person will get at least one, if not twice a year. We will be sending out an all-county test, and we want to stay on top of it, make sure it's working. I guarantee you, I have a clause in the contract that, and we don't want to learn the hard way like you had to, that if our tests aren't working and their system isn't working, I'm going to find a system that does. And I will find the funding to buy the best system we can get for the county. We are very happy with Code Red. They have been very good to work with. Our old company, not so good, and that's why we got rid of them. I just, too many problems. Sonoma Napa has gone to Code Red. And with Butte County, that we're following the testing they're doing, and we're duplicating that here, and we're trying to make sure that what happened there won't happen here. I hope that answers the question there.
Thank you. I have another question as well. I think Liberty Utilities is here as well. Just the coordination. I know we talked about power lines and trees. Maybe is there coordination between the public sector and the utilities sector that have maybe when they predict high wind days, what they're going to do, if there's anything that we can do to prevent any lines from snapping?
Well, El Dorado County was the very first county to get a public safety power shutoff last year by PG&E on the west slope. So we are actively involved with PG&E, the California Public Utilities Commission, and everybody to work with, and as well as Liberty. We meet literally monthly. I am talking literally every week with our PG&E representatives. There is a very, very robust program out there now for predicting power safety, public safety power shutoffs. I'm going to say PSPS because that's the easiest way to do it. They know based on fire forecasts when they may do it. They were late in getting us the information the first time. We learned from our mistakes. They're a great partner and they're working very hard with us. We have developed that into where we're going to have hopefully 72 hours notice before they're going to do that. And then we will be working with them to get those notifications out to everybody well before the power shut off. So you'll know that 1, you're going to have a red flag conditions, you're going to have scary fire conditions. 2, you're probably not going to have power. And we're going to work with our fire partners and PG&E, Liberty, and obviously with the Sheriff's Department. We're going to get that information to you as soon as possible.
Hello, Shannon Witt. I live in Sierra Tracker, Tahoe, Sierra. I have 2 questions. The first one is, I used to live in San Luis Obispo, and when I lived there and I bought my house, I was actually given an emergency evacuation route for a nuclear meltdown because I lived next to 2 nuclear power plants, as well as some weird little pills I was supposed to take. But I'm trying to see if there is a specific way that you guys can utilize different routes for different neighborhoods. I know we all funnel into 2 major outlets, being Pioneer Trail and Lake Tahoe Boulevard or Highway 50. But if there's certain ways that certain neighborhoods can go a distinct direction, and maybe upon escrow or given to our homeowners to know which direction to go so that not every single person is stuck up on Highway 50. There's so many back roads. I mean, you can pretty much get from State Line all the way to El Tahoe through back roads, and then from Sierra Boulevard, Elks Club through back roads. So if each neighborhood had a distinct evacuation route that could also be posted to VHR guests and everybody else, we would know where to go so that we're not all clogging up a certain area. And then if tree lines are down or cell phone towers are out, you already have a plan in place of the way you're supposed to leave. Depending on which way your fire comes from, west, north, east, south, you have an evacuation route. So I'm just thinking, I don't know if that's something that could possibly be done or not, but I was just throwing out there as a question for you guys to consider. And then secondly, being a real estate agent as well, I don't know whoever thought of the idea to stick power lines on trees, but there are a number of homes that I sell that currently have their electrical lines hitting trees first and then going to the house. As you know, in a high fire or in a high wind situation, that's going to cause a concern for breaking power lines and everything. And I've had homes that I've closed. I've been like, hey, call Liberty Utilities. And they're like, oh, well, that's not in our jurisdiction. Call the city of South Lake Tahoe or call Lake Valley. So it's like a huge runaround for what seems to be a very serious situation. And I know it's not code now. You can't build a house and put a power line on a tree. So what would we do for the homes built in the 60s and the 70s to address that situation, to have to sink additional power lines or bring them to the house instead of the tree?
Yeah, no, on your first point, I think you hit the nail on the head with it. Really depends on where the fire is coming from, which makes the evacuation routes difficult. But I think everyone up here would be willing to explore the idea of providing at least a couple options with the caveat on that of saying,
yeah,
hey,
like to the left, go to Tahoe Boulevard,
exactly.
to the right, go to Pioneer Trail, or somebody go to Kingsbury, the other person go to Spooner, this person go to 88, this person go to 50. So we don't have every single over 26,000 residents trying to use one single road to get out. We have more.
Yeah, and then to the second question again, I think you know that now you're not allowed to do that today. It's all those historical things.
Though.
So I think there would be a way that we could set up a system that if someone's coming in for a permit for a remodel or an upgrade to their home or when it sells, that there's a condition of that sale or that permit that if there's any tree-mounted power lines, that those get upgraded to proper things. So I think that's a permit condition that we could probably create for remodels and sales.
Yeah, I don't want to spark any issues with anything, but even if we run in, like I've got 3 neighbors that have it, I'd be like, hey, why don't you call this person and get it taken off, and have it done properly. So, sorry.
Well, I recognize that we all have personal responsibility to take care of our lots and our property. We do have to realize there are people out there that just don't. There's quite a few vacant lots or second homes in the community. So what are we doing about those? And do we have a report system where someone can report those properties anonymously? In the way of prevention, keeping the
I'm sorry,
properties cleared.
Would you tell me one more time? I'm sorry.
We just want to talk a little bit about maybe prevention of the fires. We talk about the break lines and keeping the properties cleared. But here we have a lot of vacant properties and vacant lots. Sizable vacant lots.
Are you in Lake Valley's fire district?
Well, I'm at the Y, but I do notice.
Okay, hold on. Let me get some help here.
I think it's a problem for the whole area, really.
This is a problem that lands at Station 3 with our admin assistant pretty regularly. We get phone calls about either a conservancy lot or a second homeowner or a perceived fire risk because they're stacking firewood and whatnot. Typically the process is if you have a concern, certainly call Fire Station 3. We'll either send the battalion chief out or an engine company that'll come take a look. We have the capacity to locate the homeowner, and we routinely send letters. At a certain point, we only have so much in the way of teeth to mandate that they do something about it. But typically, a letter on, coming with letterhead from the fire department saying you need to clean up your property has been somewhat effective. We also have had some conversations with the Conservancy in the past because, by and large, those lots were left completely alone. There was, no mitigation happening. Since then, we've engaged in communication with them quite a bit. They've changed their tune. They're actively involved in trying to clean those properties up. But really, it's within the city anyway. It's just a matter of locating the fire department, notifying us, and we'll go take a look and see what we can do.
Great. Around the areas around the, I guess you would call them the most important buildings would be like the hospitals, fire stations, and the community buildings. So around those, are we looking closer at the residential communities around there to make sure that those are cleared so we can protect our emergency buildings, or the most important?
So basin-wide, we're looking at defensible space inspections, right? So there's a program in place right now where we will have inspectors coming through this summer. They're looking at properties all over the basin, specifically in the South Shore, Lake Valley, Tahoe, Douglas, and the city. To prioritize, immediately we're going to be prioritizing some school sites after some discussion over the last week, where representatives from all the fire agencies, CAL FIRE, and us will be looking at schools in particular. But in terms of focusing on one building or another, it's schools, hospitals, where you're going to see a lot of people. And then with the 4291, which is a defensible space inspection, that's coming forth this summer pretty heavily.
Well, speaking for the community, thanks for your time, guys. Appreciate it.
Ma'am, hold on one second. There's now within the county, El Dorado County is putting together a vegetation management ordinance right now. We had a couple of workshops about that. That's forthcoming. And then even within the California State Fire Code, there's language in there that if there's a property that's so densely covered with vegetation, or lack of a better word, junk, that there's an avenue for local fire jurisdictions to walk in there and do an inspection. But we've had I think within the Lake Tahoe Basin, within the last couple of decades, there's been close to $450 million put into forest management, and a lot of that comes into defensible space inspections. That was a CAL FIRE grant that Chief Anthony put together that got us into the county too. Last thing I'll tell you is we have a grant, Fire Adapted Communities grant, and part of that is bringing in North Tahoe Fire Protection District folks to come in and do the inspections in Lake Valley and help us in the city, and even to bring in folks from Tahoe Douglas, their fire crews that do chipping and chip this way. So back to Unified Command, we're using each other's resources, folks. We're not waiting on it. We're working together to try to get these things taken care of.
Hi, my name is Andrea Olson, and any of you had read the Record Courier, because from April 6th, their county in Douglas County, they're doing their fire inspections on their VHRs. And I guess this is their chief of South Lake Tahoe. And I hear you interviewed today for the chief, so I don't know what position you are right now. At any rate, will we be starting anything like that? Because I believe this was a result of home burning, VHR, unmaintained wood stove burned to the ground. Oh, burned to the ground in Zephyr Cove very recently. And they took that, they heated that, and now they're doing fire inspections for all VHRs in the township. Will we do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
So specifically within the city, the building department's been tasked with that. We have inspectors within the city department to handle that. In the county, they've got a different system in place. But a blanket statement on the South Shore, yes, they are being inspected, and they will be inspected.
But not by fire.
It's within the city. It's we have a fire inspector, but they're managed through the building department. So same. But you won't see a fire engine pull up to do a VHR inspection in the city. You will in the county.
Go ahead.
But you will have a fire inspector who is fully qualified to do that inspection.
And will they do it for renewals?
Renewals? So, I don't know the answer to that question. I would have to. The building department would be able to tell you.
Here's another question. Since Fire Station 2 has been closed for the past 3 years, who do we go to when we want to tell you about a vacant lot or a house with needles on the roof? What fire station are we in El Tahoe?
So with Station 2 open or closed, our admin station is Fire Station 3 at the Y. And so any concerns, you would go into that
Address
station or call
3.
the number, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add to that, within El Dorado County and Lake Valley Fire District, the Lake Valley Fire District and our fire marshal worked with El Dorado County to adopt an ordinance for VHR inspections. We're doing them, and it's quite eye-opening. I think we have close to 700-800 of them. We've also done an analysis of the age of structure and which ones are sprinklered and which ones aren't, and the size. We're really going after it to we want to get our firefighters inside there to take a look at some of these buildings. And we didn't know that, you look on the outside of the street, you think the house is maybe 1,500 square feet, and it's 6,000 square feet with an indoor swimming pool. We didn't have the foggiest idea. So we're actively doing it right now. We're also working on putting some information inside to give those folks that come and visit, that they have an idea where they are. We've had situations in Meeks Bay where folks that had a medical emergency, and we talked about this just the other day at the 89 corridor meeting, and the dispatcher says, "Where are you?" And they say, "I'm in Lake Tahoe." Well, we're trying to work on that proactively, and we're already seeing the benefits of it. We'll continue doing that work.
So this will be our last question because we're right at 8 o'clock. But if you have any other questions or something more specific to your property or your neighborhood, everyone here on the panel will be sticking around, hanging out by the table. So feel free to come up and ask them any questions you have after this one.
My name is Mike Cullen. I've heard several times the relating to cell towers being dropped, communications being dropped, hard lines being dropped. I was wondering, with you guys as a collective group, do you have an emergency plan for communication when everything goes south?
Yes. So there's several different answers to that. One of the first thing is you're going to start hearing a new thing called FirstNet coming out. It's a program developed by AT&T that's spreading across all carriers that prioritizes law enforcement, fire, medical communications over wireless. But when we lose wireless, we still have a very healthy radio system within the basin that stretches all the way over to the west slope, where we can communicate on radio from, I can actually get it from Reno. I can talk to somebody in Placerville without any problem. Our radios, we have so many repeaters and we're so widespread that we can afford to lose 2 or 3 repeaters on our radio system, and we're still going to be able to communicate with each other based on what we have left over. Worst case, our county has a very, very robust ham radio network. It's old school, but guess what? It works, and it works very well. That is like way, way down the line to where we would have to communicate. But radio-wise, we can communicate. I can communicate with anybody pretty much on this board by our radio, and I'm confident in our system that even losing 1 or 2 repeater sites, we would still have communication. Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, and in the thought of being prepared, wouldn't it be important to include that ham group or those ham groups into this discussion or this group so that you had active and knowledge going on and a backup immediately?
We actually do within the Sheriff's Department. We utilize them almost exclusively with our search and rescue teams. Most of our search and rescue teams are ham. Greg could answer that question for me if he didn't leave me. Just by the virtue of what we do, most of our search and rescue people have become ham operators. So that system is embedded within the Sheriff's Department search and rescue team, who is part of the Sheriff's Office. So when we have a lot of issues that are up in the wilderness or anywhere that's kind of unique, we utilize our ham radio operators to get communication in if we start running into any issues. So it's going to be there, and they are included in the system.
But I mean, I'm talking more specifically to the Tara club that's locally here in town, or even the Sierra Net that's just off the hill in Carson. So,
absolutely, I would easily entertain that as an option.
I would really be pleased to see that.
I'm sorry, I got to say one more thing on that. Lake Tahoe Regional Fire Chiefs, as a result of the Angora Fire Blue Ribbon Commission, recently signed a letter. Chief Drennan and I both signed it. Chief Schwartz over in North Tahoe, Chief Summers in North Lake Tahoe, that's Incline Village, and also Chief Baker in Tahoe Douglas, and also the Forest Service. And is CAL FIRE in that also, Chief? To try to get a dispatch system, lake-specific, to where we can bring actually a dispatch center here, to where all of the basin resources are dispatched out of one spot. Chief Schwartz is kind of leading the battle there. So that's something that's downstream that we're working on.
And more immediately to that, the city's actually engaged in a complete overhaul of our own PSAP here, which is the Public Safety Answering Point. South Tahoe PD runs the dispatch center, and that system is looking to be overhauled with a triplicate system, meaning with 3 repeaters that would handle police, roads, and fire, and any 2 of them could go down, we could still be running. So.
Again, thank you all very much for attending this meeting tonight. Can we get a big round of applause for our panelists? And again, this is step 1. This doesn't stop tonight. We're going to be all continue working very hard. We'll make all of these materials, video, recording available online. Everyone's around for comments and questions after. Again, plan your evacuation route. Sign up for the emergency alerts, do your defensible space, and become a community leader. Again, that's ready.edso.org and TahoeLivingWithFire.info. Thank you all. Also, I would like to thank Chris Fiore and Craig for doing all the wonderful streaming and audio video tonight.